We will find out very quickly if Sonny Dykes' team is a playoff contender and a Big 12 championship contender in 2025.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 seasons. Okay, it's here. It's here in all its glory. The TCU 2025 schedule. We knew the opponents, but now we know when and where, what it's going to look like. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm sharing this with you. You can see the schedule in its form here. Sorry, the dates are a little blurry, but you get the opponents and everything else. And I'll go over the dates. So start the season at North Carolina. Then you play Abilene Christian at home, SMU at home, at Arizona State, Colorado at home, at Kansas State, Baylor at home, on the road against West Virginia, Iowa State at home, at BYU, at Houston, Cincinnati at home. This is a really difficult schedule. Like, just on the surface, I know people will say, oh, well, there's no blue bloods here, right? There's no Texas, there's no Oklahoma. You're getting all the heavy hitters in the Big 12. Now, you might be saying to yourself, we never know how these things are going to shake out, right? You look at the schedule last year, you didn't think Utah was going to be in a world of hurt when you went on the road to play that team. That looked like the toughest game on the schedule. Didn't turn out to be that way. There are numerous examples of that. But on paper, this looks difficult. And my biggest takeaway is we're going to find out really quickly how good this team is. We've talked a lot, really since the Houston game, honestly. Because I said after that loss against Houston, I was like, I don't think Sonny is getting let go. I don't feel like there will be any changes to this coaching staff after this past season, right? I didn't foresee it happening. And it didn't end up mattering because they turned things around. They did a really good job getting the job done. So in my mind, the clock really starts. If we're talking about hot seat, if we're talking about what does the future of this program look like, how much longer could he be the leader of TCU football, the clock starts this season. Because for the past 3 years, you've been building towards this slate of games. There's been all the reasonings, oh, well, we have to get better on the O-line. Running game, got to figure that out. We end up hiring a new defensive coordinator. We hired a new offensive coordinator because Garrett Riley left after 1 year. We got a new DC the next year. Well, that dust has settled. I mean, we're going into year 3 of Kendall Briles as the play caller. He's got a returning quarterback who will be coming into his second year plus. He'll have, 2.5 seasons as a starter at the end of 2025. A defense that's returning a lot of talent and will have another year of off-season learning under their belt. So this is the year where you're pushing towards being one of the teams to beat. And you go on the road to play North Carolina to start the season. You get SMU in non-conference play as well. And I've said this before about TCU SMU. That game to me has always been a really good measuring stick for how good TCU is going to be. I still think it is, but now I think it is for a different reason. For a long time, that was a great measuring stick for how good TCU was going to be because that was always the game that SMU got up for. There was a great chance that they were going to have something schemed up for that ball game that was different, whether it was different personnel package, some trick plays, whatever it was going to look like. SMU was going to be ready to play. And there were multiple games in that run where TCU was dominant, where SMU would jump out to a lead in the first quarter or the first half, and then TCU would quickly kind of get their feet under them and go win the game. And so with a couple of exceptions, I mean, towards the end of the Gary Patterson era, you had those 2 losses to Sonny Dykes SMU teams. In both those years, they finished 5-7. This past season, it didn't totally turn out to be true because they lost to SMU And then they ended up having, from a win-loss perspective, a good year. But that loss to SMU was in the middle of what was a horrendous start to the season. And in Sonny's first 2 years, I mean, that first season they went on the road, they beat them in Dallas. There was a lot of hype around that game. They obviously went on to have a great season. The Chandler Morris year they won, it did not end up being a great indicator, but it was still surprising that they were able to kind of hold their own and get it done because SMU was starting to build something. Now I think it's a great measuring stick just because SMU's talent level is getting more comparable to TCU. And, I mean, just to put it plainly, last season they were a better program. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. So you get them at home. There's going to be a lot of turnover with that team. Kevin Jennings is coming back, but they're losing pretty much all their skill guys, losing the bulk of that defense. That should be a game that you win at home if you're for real. And then you look at that start of the Big 12 slate. You're playing the Big 12 champs on the road on September 27th. Now, they've had a lot of roster turnover too, mainly Cam Scadaboo is not going to be there anymore. But still, Kenny Dillingham's a great coach. I expect that to be a very salty Arizona State team. Sam Levitt's returning at quarterback. Colorado at home, again, another school, a lot of turnover, but Coach Prime, I mean, that's going to be a tough game. The last time TCU went to Manhattan, they go to Manhattan on October 11th. The last time they went to Manhattan, they got absolutely embarrassed. K-State's coming off a disappointing season, but they're sort of in a similar boat of TCU of like, all right, this is our year. We've got more experience now. We've got a quarterback who's got an entire season under his belt. That O-line's not going to be as young. They went through a transition year last season. Rivalry game against Baylor at home. Baylor's got high expectations this season. Going on the road to Morgantown, a place where you've never really played well. Even in 2014 when you won there, it was by the skin of your teeth. Home against Iowa State. I mean, there's really like, if all these teams turn out to be what we think they are, there's not many games on paper that you're just like, all right, certified, stamp it. That's a win. Houston and Cincinnati at the end of the season, but we know what happened against Houston last year. West Virginia, Rich Rod, first season. There's probably going to be some growing pains there, but you get them later on in the year. And it's on the road in Morgantown, which, as I said earlier, tough place to play. But there's nowhere to hide. You're going to find out. I mean, that stretch of games, Steven Johnson from the Telegram laid it out pretty well. He was like, we'll know what this team is by week 3 of Big 12 play. Even if Arizona State, Colorado, and Kansas State are not as good as we expect them to be, 2 of those games on the road, if you at least can't come out of that with a 2-1 record, then you could be in trouble. So there's not much time to ease into things, figure stuff out. It's a hit the ground running type of season. The bye weeks. So you get a bye week in between North Carolina and Abilene Christian. Now, Steven Johnson said that this was TCU's decision. They moved the bye week up because they wanted the extra time. I imagine that's just because, okay, you play North Carolina on a Monday night. You're going to get back late. You're getting back early Tuesday morning. You know, film practice, schedule's kind of all messed up. But at least as someone who doesn't fully, like I'm acknowledging I don't fully understand all the logistics involved. I would rather have that bye week in between the ACU and the SMU game. Take my chances and, all right, like we think we can handle ACU on a short week and then get a little bit of extra time, get your body right, get some things figured out scheme-wise before you play SMU. Now, I imagine their thought process is, all due respect to Abilene Christian, probably not doing a lot of prep, right? Like scout team-wise, you can use that extra time to recuperate, but also get ready for SMU and trust that your team can go out there with a pretty vanilla game plan against ACU and take care of business, which makes sense. But because you have that bye week in week 2, you're talking about a 7-game stretch without a break, because your next bye week is not until in between the West Virginia and Iowa State games. So that's difficult. But, I mean, it's pretty rare that you're going to come up with a perfect scenario when we're talking about off weeks, right? Like, that's just part of how it is. You have to navigate those things. And I have more thoughts on this. So we'll come back. We'll sort of regroup, talk more about the schedule. And also some transfer players spoke to the media today. So we'll get into that as well. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Are you searching for tickets for the next big event, whether it's a concert, comedy show, or the big game? Finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache, but with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Download the Gametime app today and use Gametime Picks. The app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. The seat view is a game changer. Before I hit buy, I see exactly where my seat will be and what it looks like in the menu. It's so refreshing. The best part, you get covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal elsewhere, they will refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. So, yes, it's a difficult schedule. I mean, those road trips, Manhattan against Kansas State, in Provo, Arizona State, should have a great environment there, coming off a big season. All that's difficult. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is it unfair to expect this team to be in the Big 12 championship game given the draw of the schedule? I would say no. It's not unfair. Will it be difficult? Yes. But this is the year where you got to go do it. I mean, everything is pointing in the direction of we have the team that is ready to step up and make things happen. Josh Hoover's been fantastic. You're losing basically everyone at wide receiver, but you're replacing them with some good options. Eric McAllister being the main name there. You've shuffled around your offensive line again, but with Cade Bennett coming back from an injury, you're going to be pretty close to what you thought you would have last season. And that was a group that they were excited about and felt like could compete, right? And then defensively, I mean, you're pretty much bringing everyone back. And you got Andy Avalos in year 2, discovering what his guys do well, fine-tuning some things. This is the season to go get it. Yeah, Arizona State to start conference play is going to be tough. Baylor at home, always a tough game. Even going to Houston, that's a sneaky, trap game potentially. That non-conference schedule, not doing you many favors. You get one of the best coaches of all time. He's going to have a whole off season to really break down what you do well, find out what your tendencies are. The good thing about that is if you can escape with a victory, you will get a very clear picture of how people are going to try to attack you. Because I'm sure folks will watch that tape and say, okay, this is what Bill Belichick did against TCU. Let's follow suit, right? So it's difficult, but everything is there in front of them to go make it happen. And so it doesn't change my expectations. You're going to have to win some tough games on the road, but that's the nature of it. If you're going to play for a conference title, if you're going to play for a playoff berth, you have to win those games. And you have to take care of your business against teams that you're supposed to beat. I do wonder, looking at that rundown, though, now, what's your best guess for what the over-under will be? Because the last few seasons has been 7.5. I think with all the returning production, I'm going to say our friends at FanDuel have the over-under at 8.5, which isn't a huge difference, but you're taking that over, you're talking about a team that's 9-3. And 9-3 could get you in the Big 12 title game, depending on, if you drop one non-conference game, you have 2 losses in conference play. But this feels like a group that should be shooting for 10-plus wins. And we'll see if they can get there. It's cool to have this, though. We know what it's going to look like now. At North Carolina, Abilene Christian at home, SMU at home, playing in Tucson against Arizona State, taking on Colorado at home, in Manhattan against Kansas State, Baylor at home, at West Virginia, Iowa State in the Carter, at BYU, at Houston, and then closing the season out again with Cincinnati. I do still wonder. Some people responded to me because I put the same thought out on social media yesterday. The idea of, why do we not have this Baylor-TCU game on rivalry weekend? And the consistent thought that people sort of shot back at me was, well, the Big 12 doesn't want that game to get buried along with all the other big-time games that are happening. I guess my argument to that is I understand what the thought process is. How is it ever going to be a big national rivalry unless it's featured in that premier spot? And the hope is that those teams would get to a place again where the game has serious stakes. And so, yes, it's a rivalry game, but also it has big implications on the playoff race, on the Big 12 championship game. And if you can do that, if you put it at the end of the season, even with, yes, Michigan, Ohio State, Auburn, Alabama, Clemson, South Carolina, we can go down the list of the great rivalry games that are going to be played at the end of the year. But if you have 2 really good teams and you're talking about playoff implications being involved, then it's still going to get good treatment on television. It's going to be one of the highlighted games on College Game Day and et cetera. All the great things that come with it. So that would be my response. Put the game there and then hope that the teams can live up to the billing of it. But it's one of the few rivalries left in this league. You got the luxury of getting BYU and Utah back together. And then you got Kansas State, Iowa State, Kansas State and Kansas, and Baylor TCU. I think some of these games should be at the end of the season. Transitioning a little bit. So a few players talked with the media today. One of those was Bud Clark, who was coming back for another season. And according to Stephen Johnson with Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Bud says TCU wants to have the best safety room in the country. He says the big reason why he came back was to play under Andy Avalos. He said his football IQ expanded greatly, which led to a big season for him under the tutelage of Avalos. You never know how things are going to go. And I did think the Avalos hire was somewhat risky because things didn't end well in Boise. I mean, essentially they had him pack up because he lost the team. Like, the team was so tired of him. And there was so much tension there. They said, it's better if we move on. And even though he wasn't coming here to be the head coach, there was still those questions of all right, what does that mean for these TCU guys and how they're going to fit in under a new regime? But so far, it seems like he's really beloved by these defensive guys. And he brings a lot of energy to the table. So, you see that, right? Like, you see the enthusiasm, the care he has for the guys on his team. And then, the biggest thing is culture is so tied in with winning. You can't have one and not the other. And we can argue, what comes first? Does the culture produce the winning, or does the winning produce the culture? But late in the season, when they were rattling off wins, suddenly this was, a team that was really bonded together again. After a couple of years ago, felt like that was a group that was sort of split off into different groups. And there was some splintering among the team chemistry itself. Last season, you didn't get that feel. But I would also say, even when they were struggling, it felt like nobody turned on each other, which is an encouraging sign. Jordan Dwyer also talked, the new wide receiver from Idaho. He said he feels like he was the best wide receiver in FCS last year. He's got a big chip on his shoulder coming into this season. He says he knows how many people don't respect the FCS, which gives him something to prove. I mean, yeah, he's going to be doubted. And it's just one of those things. You got to prove that you can play at this level. But Jordan Dwyer was fantastic last year at Idaho. I mean, you can only play the people on your schedule. You can only go up against the matchups that are given to you. And he won those matchups consistently. So I'm not super worried about that step up in competition. You never know, but he seems like a dude that's built for it. Watching the video of him talking to the media, he seems very confident, which is what you want. If my receivers are not confident, borderline cocky, then I have some questions. I think in football in general, you have to believe in yourself, but that's in particular as a position group where, yeah, you got to have a little swagger about you. And you're going to be counted upon to win in one-on-one matchups on a consistent basis. So you have to go do it. When we come back, hoops tonight. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Okay, big women's basketball matchup tonight in Manhattan, Kansas. TCU taking on Kansas State. I said this was going to be a top 10 matchup. Ended up being top 15 because K-State dropped out of the top 10 due to their loss to Colorado. But they're sitting there at 12. Still a big-time game and a huge game in the standings because they're tied right now at 9-1 in conference play. As far as K-State and what to know about their personnel, Aoka Lee is their leading scorer at 16 points a game, the post player. To my knowledge, she will not be available. She suffered a foot fracture a couple weeks ago and hasn't been playing since. I don't think she'll be ready for this game. I haven't seen an update that, would tell me anything different. So a chance for Sedona Prince to hopefully bounce back from a really rough game against Iowa State where she scored 0 points. Their leading scorer and assist player is Serena Sundell, their point guard. They shoot the ball well from three, about 40%, 50% from the field. As you would expect from a really good team, they play good defense. And I saw today that it's a sellout. So, I mean, they're ready to go. They're ready to show out for that team and what's going to be a huge game. And this will be a big moment for Mark Campbell. I was really impressed. I mean, Iowa State, the record is not as impressive as it typically is for them. But going on the road and getting a victory in Ames like that was important. And it's difficult to do. They handled the environment there really well. I feel like that week off helped them a lot. And so now you got to carry that over 2 days later, 3 days later, you got to go into another tough environment and win another game. If you do that, then you give yourself the inside track to being the team to beat in the Big 12. And then on the men's side, West Virginia tonight, 7 p.m. at home, trying to get to 5 and 6 in conference play. Iowa State in Ames on Saturday night, or Saturday afternoon, College game day will be there. So that'll be intriguing to see. But Iowa State, I don't know what to make of the Cyclones. They're having a really good year. They've lost 2 in a row. They lost to KU on the road last night on Big Monday, which not entirely surprising. But before that, they just blew a tire against Kansas State at home. So I don't love TCU's chances with Iowa State coming off 2 straight losses and having basically 5 days to rest and recover and get right for that ball game. But you're sort of playing with house money, especially if you can find a way to win tonight against a West Virginia team that's 500 in conference play and keep that momentum going as you try to get closer to a 500 record again in the Big 12. We'll be back tomorrow with plenty of coverage of that and more. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.